Welcome to Live Coffee Break with Pam. In the weekly video, I answer 1 to 2 questions from my marketing peeps. Today's question is about product positioning. And the topic came up when Cliff asked me to create a messaging framework. After a 15-minute discussion, we came to realize that we couldn't do that because he hasn't clearly defined his products yet. So I talked to him about what he needs to do to position his product. So after watching this video, you will have tools and a basic understanding on how to start to position your products. Plus, knowing your products well will also help you in terms of your overall marketing communications, especially in the areas of content creation and content marketing. So let's start with the fundamentals, okay? 3 questions for today. Number 1, what is product positioning? Number 2, what is the difference between product positioning and a messaging framework? Number 3, how should I go about position my products, right? If it sounds foreign to you, I promise it's not as complicated as it seems. So let me break that down for you. And if you liked my way of explaining things, I would appreciate it if you can subscribe and comment. Now, first thing first, positioning your product is super important. You can't market unless you know clearly, I mean clearly, what you are selling and how it is positioned in the market you are in. Once you know where you stand, you'll have a stronger grasp on how to communicate. Does that make sense? So, number 1, what is product positioning? Product positioning is a process of deciding and communicating how you want your audience to think and feel about your product. What is the experience you want to provide? What is the first thing you want your customer base to think when they hear about your product? What is the first word they would say when they see your product? I know you can't control their entire thought process, but you can influence them through what you want them to know and what you want to share. In other words, you can educate them. In many ways, product positioning has been mixed or been part of customer experience, brand personas, even designs. I mean, designs of your product or the overall customer journey. So just think about the physical look and feel of your product, your store, your logo, your content, or even your whole communication style. And it sounds very abstract, I know, but to make the concept feel more concrete, there are 4 elements that I like to go through so it's easy for you to define your product positioning. I'll get to that shortly. Before I do that, I want to address another source of confusion. That is the difference between product positioning and the messaging framework. Remember how I said that the product positioning is the way you want your audience to think and feel about your product? Well, a messaging framework is a logical and structured representation of your product and services, unique promises, and differentiation. Okay, the formal definition sounds like blah, blah, blah. Let me explain it in another way. Product positioning is what? What is your product about? What should your customer think and feel when they hear about your product? Messaging framework is how. How should you talk about your product to your customers? So, to make it simple, product positioning is what, and the messaging framework is how. You need to define, develop, and finalize your product before determining what to say and how to say it. Therefore, product positioning will come first. The messaging framework will come second. Okay. So let me sidetrack a little bit. If you want to know more about developing a messaging framework, I created a blog post to show you how to do that. The title of the blog post is How to Create a Solid Messaging Framework, a guide for B2B marketers. No need to memorize that. I would add the blog post link on the description so you can check it out at your leisure. If you are a YouTube person, I also created 3 videos for messaging framework. Each one of them is about 6 to 8 minutes long. Give them a watch when you have a few minutes to spare. And after reading the blog or watching the videos, many of my peeps know how to start putting their messaging framework together. So can you. So try that. With that being said, let me circle it back. So we've been talking about product positioning. So far, I've covered the definition of product positioning, the differences between product positioning and the messaging framework, and also the sequence of developing product positioning and the messaging framework. Like I said, do position your product first, messaging framework will come later. See, now I explained these 2 terms. They don't seem to be complicated and overwhelming, right? And you know the key differences between the two. Again, if you like my style of explaining things, please comment and subscribe. That would mean a lot to me. The last question we need to tackle is what elements are included in developing your product positioning. Since it's all about look and feel and guiding people's thought process, the first thing you need to decide is, do you need to name your product? What is a short description of your product? What do you want to call your product? Should the product name be the same as your company name? So when it comes to naming products, there are many strategic discussions at the executive level. You may not be the decision maker, but you need to understand the logic behind whether to name or not to name. A unique name can evoke a visual or spark imagination in a person's mind. For example, you know my name is Pam Didner. You have heard me at a coffee break or at a conference. When someone says Pam Didner, a visual would come to mind. How I presented myself during coffee break or at the session would subconsciously convey how you feel about me. Therefore, a name is important. Then another question arises, should the company name be your product name? If you only offer one product, chances are that it's okay that your company name represents your product. In the past 10, 15 years, many SaaS-based companies have created their own categories and use fun and exciting names such as Asana, Monday, Harvest, Box, etc. to name their companies. Their products are their company names. That is great. If you use a creative and interesting word to describe your product, you need to have a short description following your name right away to explain what that is. Does that make sense? For example, when people see the word Asana, they immediately think, what is that? Therefore, your short description should explain the what questions right away so the potential customers form a product visual in their minds instantly. Asana. What is that? Oh, it manages your projects, works, and tasks online. Okay, it's an online project management tool. Cool. I got it. No confusion. So, if your companies are growing and you offer many product lines, chances are you may need to create names for different product lines. Many growing B2B companies tend to pick solid names so the peoples can visualize their products immediately. A great example is cybersecurity firms. They tend to use the words like auto shield, seamless defense, etc., to name their products because it's easy for their customer to relate or visualize their products. So the purpose of a name is to evoke a visual in a person's mind. Therefore, naming or not naming your product again is a strategic decision. However, you should always have a short and differentiated description to explain your product. Okay, naming, differentiated product descriptions are the first two elements of a product positioning. The next element is logo. Should you give your product a logo, or is the corporate logo good enough to help you customize and visualize your product in their minds? All right. Again, this is another strategic discussion. A logo is a good visual aid to help crystallize your product in your customers' minds. So if you have a product name, I would recommend to have a logo associated with it. The logo can be a simple design of your product name with a great font. That by itself is a logo. The last element is product segmentation. Product segmentation is complicated. I cannot even say that word. It is complicated. Many companies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do product segmentation. I'm not going to talk about how to do it today, but I want to share with you the thought process. You can segment the same product to different audiences. The best example is UberShare, Uber, UberX, or even Uber Eat. It's the same ride service, but it targets different customers, segments for their specific needs. You can also modify your products to different tiers with unique features to target more customers. Many SaaS-based companies, product offerings are free, basic, pro, and enterprise, right? And additional features and services are added at the different tiers. Another well-known example is the BMW 3 Series, 5 Series, and 7 Series. And this is the most common and discussed in terms of segmentation. But recently, there are also BMW i Series and BMW M Series. So you can see segmentation can get complicated quickly when you constantly add new product lines or serve a different sets of customers. When you are growing, you offer more products. Over time, your segmentations will become messy, and you need to reevaluate your segmentations. And segmentation overhaul is a lot of work. I work with a couple startup to do that. It's actually quite a bit of work when you develop a certain kind of segmentation. It becomes complicated. You have to look at that again and get back to basics. So here's a quick wrap up. Number one, you need to define your product before you can create a messaging framework. Number two, product positioning is the what. Define and decide how you want your customers to think and feel about your products. Number three, messaging framework is how to communicate the uniqueness and the promises of your products. Number four, product positioning can be complicated, but there are at least 4 concrete elements to consider: naming, description, logo, and segmentation. Honestly, product positioning, corporate culture, brand personas, customer experience, the design of your product, even the user interface, UX, are all interconnected. All these elements will start bubbling up when you start talking about naming, description, logo, and segmentation. You'll need to discuss these factors internally and have a great debate collectively. Try to align everyone first before you're moving forward to finalize your product positioning. In general, positioning a product is a lengthy process. In a smaller companies, you probably can do it on your own. A bigger company usually hire outside consultants to facilitate that whole process. We can position our product wherever, however we want. Ultimately, we can control how customers think and then feel about our brands and the products. What we can do is to focus on what we can control, define our products well, make the best possible effort to present them, but most importantly, let's find ways to serve our customers better. All right, so that's today's coffee break. Subscribe, comment below. Feel free to ask questions anytime. I love to hear from you. And also, if you have any question about positioning your product, ask below. I would love to answer them.